10 things that make her think about you nonstop. Old Stoic wisdom. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. She thinks about you more than she admits. And it's not because you chased her. It's because you didn't. You moved with quiet purpose, not with noisy pursuit. Some men walk into a room and shift the atmosphere without saying a word. She notices that. It's not just what you say or do. It's who you are being. She's drawn to the way you hold yourself. Calm under pressure, firm in your values, and uninterested in shallow validation. You don't try to win her over. You simply live by principle, and that resonates on a deeper level. In a world full of men performing, you stand out by being grounded. In this video, I'm going to share 10 powerful, Stoic-inspired qualities that make a woman think about you long after you've left the room. These aren't manipulative tricks. They're traits of a man who leads himself, who lives with clarity, strength, and presence. Because the moment she realizes she can't easily define you is the moment she can't stop thinking about you. Let's begin. Number 1. Your composure in chaos. She doesn't repeat the sweet words. She replays the silence, that one moment when the world tilted, the room tensed, and emotions surged like a storm, and you didn't flinch, you didn't try to win the argument. You didn't fire back with louder words or reach for control like it was your lifeline. You just paused, breathed, owned the space like a man with an iron mind. And that's what made you unforgettable. She expected drama. What she got was discipline. And that shift, that shocking contrast, is what lives in her head rent-free, because most men crack under pressure. They puff up, shout down, or shrink into apologies just to keep the peace. But not you. You weren't there to perform. You were grounded, rooted, stoic, and that subtle strength, it speaks volumes. It tells her you've been somewhere darker than this moment. You fought demons she'll never see, and you won. You didn't need to dominate her. You didn't chase validation like a boy who hasn't met himself. You simply were present, centered, unshakable. That's old Stoic wisdom in action, not coldness, not detachment, but fierce emotional clarity. Maybe it happened when she was fiery, frustrated, throwing barbs just to see what would land. She wanted a reaction, maybe even a little chaos, but you didn't play. You let her unravel without unraveling yourself. You let her speak, but you didn't let her steer you off course. That restraint, that iron mind, that's what stays with her long after the moment has passed. Not because you ignored her, but because you saw through the storm and didn't let it drag you in. And that's the mark of a man who's done the work, the kind of work Stoic principles demand, building strength in stillness, peace in pressure. You didn't chase, you didn't plead, you didn't panic. You remained still when everything begged you to react. That moment of stillness, it echoed louder than any raised voice ever could. It lingered in her mind because it wasn't dramatic. It was dangerous, not in a threatening way, but in a how is he so different kind of way. And now, even when you're gone, that image of you stands like a statue in her memory. Calm, composed, invincible. She asks herself, why didn't he fight back? Why didn't he lose it like the others? Why did he just breathe? The answer, because you've already gone 10 rounds with your ego. You've looked your impulses in the face and refused to let them rule you. You've embraced the old Stoic wisdom that tells you power isn't about control. It's about not needing it. You live by Stoic principles that say, he who masters himself masters all. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need the last word, because you've already won the war inside your own soul. That's what haunts her. Not a flash of anger, not some grand romantic gesture, but the image of a man who refused to be moved by noise, who chose peace over performance, who let his presence speak instead of his pride. That's the version of you she can't shake, because it wasn't about her or the moment. It was about you, the man who didn't bend, the man who didn't burn, the man who stood like a mountain while everything else swayed. So take a breath and think about that. how rare it is, how magnetic it is, how undeniably powerful it is for a man to sit in the middle of a storm and choose stillness. Not silence out of fear, but silence out of wisdom. The old Stoics weren't cold, they were calculated. They understood that restraint is the ultimate display of strength. And when you embody that, when you become the man who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't crumble, that's when you become unforgettable. And now, before we move on, ask yourself, have you ever held your center when everything tried to pull you off it? If you have, you already know the impact. So tell me, brother, drop it in the comments or just say the words, "I stayed calm," because sometimes that's the loudest thing a man can say. Number 2, you never fought for attention. You never begged. You never scrambled to be seen. And that made her feel your presence more than any loud gesture ever could. While other men tripped over themselves to impress, you stayed grounded, focused. Still, that's not weakness. It's dominance. That's not passivity. It's power. That's the Stoic edge, a quiet confidence that radiates strength. A man who follows the paths of wisdom knows he doesn't need to chase. He knows his value is not up for negotiation. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You understood this? You didn't reach, you didn't plead, you let her come to you. And in that silence, in that space you created, you became unforgettable. You didn't compete, you didn't perform, and yet you won, because you were whole without her validation. Let that sink in. You didn't act indifferent, you just didn't act desperate. You didn't try to be seen. You made yourself felt. That's the power of Stoicism. That's the way of Epictetus, the warrior mind, the paths of wisdom that never bend under pressure. You didn't explode into her world. You became the storm she never saw coming. While others crowded her attention, you made space for her to wonder about you. And in that space, she started thinking. She remembered the steady look in your eyes, the calm way you spoke, the way you didn't chase every moment. You became a question mark in her mind she couldn't erase, because you weren't moved by fear. You were moved by principle. You didn't react. You responded, and you always responded with strength. Let me make this clear: most men panic in silence. They fill every gap with noise. You didn't. You held the silence. You owned the silence. You mastered the silence. You became the exception. You didn't fold when you weren't chosen. You didn't chase when your name wasn't spoken. And now, in the quiet, she hears you louder than ever. That's stoicism winning. That's masculine presence is rooted in something eternal. Not lust, not validation, but in truth. You stood in your own frame and let the chips fall where they may. And that is why she remembers you, because she never got to see you lose yourself, because you never lost control. Don't misunderstand, your silence wasn't passive. It was strategic. It was disciplined. It was a victory in disguise. She didn't forget you. She can't. Because a man who follows the paths of wisdom and stands firm like Epictetus becomes unforgettable. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, he said. And you did just that. You decided you would be solid, unmoved, whole, and you became it. You must never beg to be chosen. You must never compete for what should gravitate toward you naturally. You must never place your self-worth in the hands of another. That is the death of power. That is the erosion of your masculine edge. Let's be clear. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's about being in control. It's about being centered. You win when you don't fold. You win when you don't chase. You win when you remain still while the world rushes past. And in doing so, you create a gravity that pulls others in. That's how you win her thoughts. That's how you win her reflection. That's how you win. Not by effort, but by essence. Follow the paths of wisdom. Walk like Epictetus. Move like a man who already won. Because once you do, she'll never stop thinking about the man who never tried to prove his worth, but still made her feel like he was the only one that ever had it. If this spoke to you, if you're on the path of wisdom and ready to stand firm in your truth, then like this video, share it with a brother who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe for more unshakable Stoic power. Drop a comment below to lock it into your mindset. Comment to remember. I am felt, even in my absence. Let the world chase attention. You, stand still and let your presence echo in silence. Number 3, the way you disappear without bitterness. You didn't slam the door. You didn't unleash a dramatic monologue. You didn't hit block like it was some grand power move. No cryptic quotes, no guilt games, no fireworks. You just vanished, like a breeze leaving a still room. No noise, no mess, just space. And that's exactly what made her feel it. That quiet exit didn't scream. It echoed. It lingered. It made her wonder, because you didn't disappear in anger. You disappeared in peace. And brother, that peace, that's power. That's the mark of a man who follows Stoic rules. You see, true strength isn't about who gets the last word. It's not about proving who cared more. It's about not needing to. And that's what practical Stoicism teaches. She expected sparks, maybe a messy send-off, maybe something she could screenshot and dissect with her friends. But you gave her nothing to hold on to. And that shook her. Because when a man walks away without venom, without fanfare, and without the need to be understood, he doesn't leave emptiness. He leaves presence. That kind of detachment. It's not cold. It's not bitter. It's refined. It's the final form of emotional discipline. It says, I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because I've already made peace. And in a world full of reactive, impulsive men trying to control every narrative, your silence became louder than their noise. You didn't chase. You didn't explain yourself for the 7th time. You didn't drop one last, just so you know text. You followed the Stoic rules. You accepted what was beyond your control, and you let go. That, my friend, is practical Stoicism in action. That's not passive. That's elevated, because anyone can rage quit, anyone can lash out. But it takes a whole man to walk away with a calm heart and a clean conscience. And let's be honest, she didn't see it coming. She expected emotional debris. Instead, she got nothing. Just silence, stillness, space. And now she checks her phone. Not because you're calling, but because she's haunted by the fact that you aren't. She rereads your old messages, wondering if she missed a sign. But all she finds is that unmistakable stillness, the kind only found in a man who's already moved on within. And while she may have thought she held the power when you left, what she didn't expect was how heavy your absence would feel. You didn't ask to be remembered, but you are. You didn't beg for closure, but you created it, on your terms, without noise, without clinging, without compromising your dignity. That's not apathy. That's mastery. That's how Stoic rules win the long game. So don't chase. Don't explain yourself into exhaustion. Be the man who disappears without bitterness. Be the man whose silence says everything. Let her sit with the weight of what she can't reach anymore. That's how you live rent-free in her mind. Not by demanding attention, but by earning reflection. Not by leaving a wound, but by showing her what a whole man looks like walking away. That is practical Stoicism. That is presence. That is you. Remember this. You must never let drama define your departure. Let peace do the talking. Let stillness do the remembering. And when you go, go like a storm that never raged, only passed. Number 4. The things you didn't say. She waited for the usual chaos, the explosion, the drama, a 3-paragraph declaration, a 2 a.m. text laced with heartbreak and hope. But none of that came. Instead, there was just stillness, not indifference, not cruelty, just a quiet, deliberate space. And in that space, she didn't find closure. She found herself staring into a mirror, haunted not by your words, but by your silence. That, my friend, is old Stoic wisdom in action. It's not about punishing her. It's not about playing some game. It's about having an iron mind, a refusal to beg for understanding from someone who never really listened when it mattered. You didn't storm out. You didn't grovel. You didn't bleed emotionally on a digital page, hoping she'd finally get it. No, you stood still. You stood strong. You chose dignity over drama, and that silence, stoic, composed, unshakable, spoke louder than 1,000 love songs ever could. At first, sure, she labelled it as cold, maybe even arrogant, but as time ticked on and your absence stretched into her nights, something changed. The silence became weighty. It pressed on her ribs in the quiet hours. Why didn't he chase me? Why didn't he try? Why didn't he fight for this? Those questions don't fade. They fester, because she expected what she'd always known: emotional fireworks, messy desperation, a man crumbling just to be seen. But you weren't just any man. You were grounded in Stoic principles. You didn't react. You responded with nothing, and that's nothing that was everything. Because when a man of iron mind chooses not to speak, it isn't weakness. It's a choice, a message, a line drawn in philosophical bedrock. You didn't post cryptic quotes. You didn't send pity invites. You didn't try to barter back your value. You knew your worth, and that's what changed the game. See, the old Stoic wisdom teaches us that you don't chase someone who ran from your truth. You don't explain your soul to someone who only skimmed the surface. You didn't owe her a monologue. You owed yourself peace. That's what you chose, and that's what lingers with her now, because silence, when wielded by a Stoic man, isn't empty. It's full of meaning. It echoes. It reverberates. It grows louder in the stillness of her room, in the gaps between her scrolling, in the corners of her denial. It's the kind of silence that speaks volumes every night. And that's the brilliance of Stoic principles. You don't burn bridges. You just quietly walk away from those who set fire to connection and expect you to rebuild it. So be that man. The one who doesn't explain himself to ears that only ever heard noise. Be the man whose silence holds more gravity than another man's desperate poetry. Don't fall into the trap of oversharing. Don't spill sacred words for someone who never truly valued them. Be still. Be solid. Be the echo in her memory. Because the things you didn't say, that's the soundtrack that plays now, and it's louder than ever. Let her sit in that silence. Let her wrestle with what wasn't said. Because you, my friend, embraced the oldest, sharpest truth sometimes. The loudest message is the one never spoken. And that, right there, is the mark of a man who walks with an iron mind and lives by old Stoic wisdom. If you've made it this far, you're not just reading, you're remembering your strength. The strength to say nothing. When silence says everything. This is the path of the iron mind, guided by old Stoic wisdom. No more begging to be understood. No more wasting words on ears that don't listen. Comment below, I choose peace over proving myself. Let the world, and her, feel the weight of your silence. Number 5. When you choose peace over drama. There she was, waiting for the spark, the clash, the emotional explosion. She gave you openings, laid traps, tempted you with easy bait. And what did you do? You walked right past it, not with coldness, but with clarity. Not to avoid the moment, but to master it. That's not apathy. That's art. That's what practical stoicism looks like in real time, where peace isn't passive, it's powerful. She might have called it detachment, but that's because most people don't recognize self-control when it's done right. The Stoic man doesn't bark for attention. He doesn't bite back just to feel heard. He doesn't need the last word, because he already owns the truth. Every single time you could have snapped back, you didn't. You had the right, the ammunition, the perfect reply, but you held it back. Why? Because you're not in the business of collecting wins in wars that shouldn't exist. You live by Stoic rules. And rule 1, don't trade peace for pride. Because the moment you do, you lose both. Other men might have flooded her inbox with paragraphs, trying to rewrite the narrative. They might have begged, guilt-tripped, shouted into the void, but not you. You stood still, calm, centered, like a mountain in a storm. And that composure hit her deeper than any dramatic outburst ever could. You weren't silent out of fear. You weren't still out of weakness. You simply knew the battlefield wasn't worth stepping onto. She thought she was testing your limit, trying to shake your core. But all she uncovered was that your core doesn't shake. That's what Stoic strength is. It's not about domination. It's not about loud declarations or explosive reactions. It's the quiet, steady control of a man who understands that not all noise deserves a response. That is practical stoicism in action, letting the dust settle while you remain unmoved. Marcus Aurelius, wise old Roman and grandfather of Stoic rules, once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And you followed that to the letter. You didn't mimic her chaos. You didn't mirror the storm. You simply stood in contrast, a presence so grounded that she had no choice but to feel it. And now, she does, not in the heat of the moment, but late at night, when the room is still, when the drama fades and only memory remains. That's when your silence starts to speak. That's when your calm becomes unforgettable. She might have told herself you didn't care, that your calm was cold, but deep down, she knows what you really showed her. Emotional discipline. You didn't chase her approval. You didn't crumble for validation. You walked away not as a loser, but as a man who won something bigger, his peace. That's not easy. That's mastery. And it's the kind of thing that lingers long after the texts stop, after the noise dies, after the emotions cool. That space you created, it wasn't empty. It was sacred. It taught her more than any speech ever could. Because you didn't just speak her language, you showed her a different one entirely. The language of presence, of self-respect, of a man governed by practical stoicism, not by fleeting emotion. That's the kind of man she remembers, not the one who shouted, but the one who chose silence with power, the one whose energy didn't beg to be noticed. It demanded it by simply being different. That's you. That's the Stoic difference. Let it speak. Let her feel it. Let the silence keep teaching. Number 6. You had a life beyond her. You never revolved around her world. You didn't orbit her schedule like a satellite hoping for attention. You had your own mission, your own rhythm, your own fire. And that shook her. That made her pause. That made her feel both valued and intrigued, because she was never the center of your universe. Yet somehow, you made her feel like a queen without dethroning your own purpose. That's masculine clarity. That's power. That's how a man walks the paths of wisdom. The old Stoics like Epictetus weren't just men in robes talking philosophy. They were warriors of the mind. They knew a man must never trade his purpose for comfort. And you didn't. You stood firm. You didn't surrender your goals for validation. You didn't bend to her whims. You honored your mission, and because of that, you earned her respect, her curiosity, her lasting attention. Most men crumble the moment they care. Their backbone dissolves, their schedule melts, they drop plans. They betray their own momentum in the name of love. But real love, lasting admiration, comes from standing tall. A woman might smile when you make her the center, but deep down, she's looking for a man with gravity of his own, a man who can lead, who can say no when needed, who can choose her without needing her. That's stoicismwin. That's the difference between being liked for a moment and remembered for a lifetime. You must understand this when you walk your path with purpose. Without apology, without flinching, you become unforgettable. You become the mountain she orbits. When you declined her invite respectfully, you didn't push her away, you pulled her in. When you took time to respond because you were locked in your craft, your growth, your structure, it wasn't distance, it was depth. She didn't see a man playing games. She saw a man building an empire, a man grounded, a man with internal code, unshaken by emotion, clear-eyed in storms. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You embodied that. You weren't cold, you were calm, you weren't indifferent, you were decisive, you didn't drift, you moved with direction. Let's get this straight. You didn't lose yourself trying to become her everything. You stayed rooted in your own becoming. That unsettles a woman more than desperation ever could. You weren't chasing, you were building, you were mastering life, and that mystery, that man who didn't stall his progress for her affection, that's who haunts her thoughts now. Because when a man chooses the path of wisdom over the pursuit of approval, he wins every time. That quiet independence, that self-command that stoicism win. That's what lingers in her mind, not the words, not the gifts, but the man who never paused his growth, never gave up his center, never waited to be chosen, because he had already chosen himself. You must stay the course. You must protect your rhythm. You must guard your mission like it's your lifeblood, because it is. And when you do, she won't just think about you, she won't just miss you, she'll wonder how she ever let you go. Stay strong, stay sovereign, walk your path, win. If you found value in this, hit like, share it with a brother who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more timeless wisdom drawn from the Stoics and the modern path of the high-value man. Comment below to claim your strength and stay grounded in your purpose. I walk my path with power and clarity. Let that be your daily affirmation. Say it, live it, own it. Remember, you are not here to orbit. You are here to lead. Number 7, your eyes spoke louder than your lips ever could. And that is where old Stoic wisdom lives. You see, there's a quiet power in the man who doesn't fill silence with noise, a man who doesn't chase validation with too many words. You didn't try to win her over with flattery or charm. You simply were. Present, steady, unshaken. When you looked at her, there was no hunger, no pressure, no performance, just calm intensity, like a still lake with the depth of an ocean beneath. That's the iron mind in action, not a theory from a book. That's Stoic principles, breathing through your gaze, not preaching from your mouth. Don't underestimate how that unsettled her. In the best way. Most men. They flinch when feelings flare. They get defensive. They try to fix it. Or worse, they vanish. But not you. You didn't run. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't reach for control. You just stood there, steady as a mountain, absorbing the storm without becoming it. That's rare. That's unforgettable. That's you. And even if she couldn't put her finger on it at the moment, it stayed with her, long after, because old Stoic wisdom doesn't just impress, it imprints. Be honest now, do you even realize the weight of that kind of presence? That when she spoke with fire in her voice or sadness in her eyes, and you didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, didn't judge, that spoke to her soul louder than any sweet line ever could. Your stillness told her, I see you, all of you, and I don't need to fix you to feel strong. That, my friend, is what true masculine groundedness looks like. It's not about being cold. It's about being contained. It's not apathy. It's authority. Inner authority. Stoic principles carved into the way you breathe, the way you see, the way you stay. And here's the part that gets her later. When the world goes quiet and she's alone in her car, or brushing her hair, or drifting off to sleep, she's not replaying what you said. She's remembering how it felt to be seen without being assessed, to be held without being handled. She thinks back to that one time she unravelled a little, and your eyes, without an ounce of judgment, just held space. Or that quiet moment when she laughed, and you looked at her like you weren't trying to be the reason, just grateful to witness it. There was no act, no chase, no insecurity, just presence, iron mind, soft eyes. Don't you see? That's the moment she can't shake. That's what makes her think about you when she's not trying to. That kind of calm confidence, that unspoken strength, it's more seductive than anything scripted. It's carved from years of self-respect, from learning how to sit in discomfort without reacting, from becoming a man who doesn't need to be seen to know he matters. That is the old Stoic wisdom in full bloom. Not a lecture, not a philosophy, but a way of being. So don't go chasing her memory. Be the man she remembers because you didn't chase. Be the eye in the storm, the one she couldn't shake, not because you said the perfect thing, but because you were the one man who didn't need to. Number 8, you let her go without resistance. When she pulled away, maybe subtly, maybe stormily, she expected the usual script, a chase, a protest, a tangle of words trying to pull her back in. She braced for the ego, the drama, the desperate need to hold on. But that's not what you gave her. You did the unexpected. You did the strongest thing a man can do. You let her go, not out of bitterness, not to play games, but from something far deeper: self-respect. You didn't fall apart. You didn't drown in what-ifs. You didn't blow up her phone, or show up at her door, or beg her to remember how good it was. No. You stood still. You accepted her choice, and you made one of your own, to honor your worth without needing validation. That's practical stoicism in motion. It's not passive, it's not cold, it's clear. It's knowing that love cannot be demanded or dragged back into place. You knew the truth most men avoid if it has to be begged for. It's no longer love, it's negotiation. And that's not how a man of Stoic rules plays. Don't grovel, don't plead. Be the man who understands this love must come freely. Or it doesn't come at all. You didn't force her to stay. You gave her the dignity of choice. And in doing so, you gave yourself something even greater. Freedom. Real freedom. The kind a Stoic mind treasures. You understood that pressure creates resistance, but presence creates memory. You didn't just leave quietly. You left powerfully. You left her with peace, not pieces. That takes guts. That takes emotional discipline. And that's where Stoic rules shine brightest. Not in theory, but in the fire of letting go. It made her pause. Wonder. Who is this man who lets go without lashing out, who doesn't beg, bargain or break, who doesn't need chaos to feel closure? That stillness you carried, that calm you chose, that became unforgettable. Because most men crumble. You didn't. Most men try to force connection. You didn't. You let her walk away, and you stood tall. That's practical stoicism with a backbone. That's what echoes in her long after you're gone. Don't underestimate that moment. Don't think silence isn't powerful. Your stillness. It screamed value. It whispered, I don't need to be chosen to know I'm worthy. You gave her something rare space. And in that space, she began to see clearly, not just you, but herself. Because when you walked away without resistance, you didn't leave her empty-handed, you left her with a mirror. And now in the quiet of her day, when the world softens and the masks drop, she remembers not just that you let her go, but how you did it. Calm, clear, complete. No fireworks, no farewell monologue, just grace. That kind of departure is unforgettable. It didn't shout, it lingered. Because when a man walks with the iron calm of Stoic rules and the steady fire of practical stoicism, he doesn't leave a mess, he leaves a legacy. And that's what makes her think about you. Nonstop. If this spoke to something deep in you, like share and subscribe for more grounded wisdom rooted in old Stoic truths, and let's keep the conversation going. Comment below to lock it in. Letting go with dignity is louder than chasing with desperation. Stand firm, stay calm, be the mirror, not the noise. Number 9. The way you grew in silence. That is what stays in her mind. No noise, not desperation, but silence, sharp, focused, powerful. In that stillness, you chose the path most men ignore, the paths of wisdom. While others broadcast their pain, you mastered yours. While most sought sympathy, you sought strength. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't post cryptic quotes meant to stir emotion. No, you got to work, quietly, relentlessly, stoically. Epictetus once said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That's what you did. You built, you transformed. Not for her, but for the man in the mirror. While she scrolled and peeked, expecting to see damage, she found a man walking the paths of wisdom, calm, centered, better, and that shook her, because growth, real growth, is louder in silence than any scream for attention. Your stillness screamed strength. Your absence echoed louder than presence. You didn't fall. You recalibrated. You didn't disappear. You upgraded. You weren't proving anything to her. You were proving everything to yourself. Let's make this clear in a world that thrives on reaction. Your control became your dominance. While she was waiting for you to fall apart, you were putting yourself together, piece by powerful piece. You hit the gym, not to post thirst traps, but to own your discipline. You read, you worked, you rested, you healed, not because you wanted to show her anything, but because you remembered who you are, because you walked in stoicism, not sorrow. You didn't spiral, you sharpened. That's a win. That's power. That's what makes her think about you non-stop. Not because she's still in love, but because your growth forced reflection. You became the man she hoped you wouldn't become, the one who didn't need her to become great. That is why she checks your story. That is why old pictures resurface. That is why your name lives in the corners of her mind, because you're not chasing. You're ascending. You didn't announce your comeback. You came back. You didn't fight for closure. You closed the door and opened a new chapter, with purpose, with dignity, with stoic wisdom. And that rattles her. It forces her to confront what she lost while you mastered what you were always meant to become. Never forget people remember evolution, quiet strength, grace under fire. That's what Stoicism teaches. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca wrote, "You stopped imagining. You started doing it. That is how a man wins. You walked the paths of wisdom. You stood with Epictetus. You lived Stoicism. You won, not through revenge, but through resurrection, not through chaos, but through clarity. And that is unforgettable. That is unstoppable. That is you now. So don't go back. Don't explain. Don't seek validation. Continue to rise. Continue to master. Continue to win. That is the only message she'll ever hear, and the only one you'll ever need to send." Number 10. Your distance had purpose. And not the kind wrapped in games or guilt. You didn't pull away to punish her. You didn't fall silent like a sulking boy. You stepped back like a man who knows himself, and that makes all the difference. Old Stoic wisdom doesn't shout, doesn't beg, doesn't flinch. It observes, it recalibrates, it sharpens the blade in stillness. You moved back not to disappear, but to evolve. That iron mind of yours, it wasn't shutting down, it was tuning in. You didn't vanish to make her miss you. You stepped away to realign with your own code. That's the quiet power of Stoic principles. It's not the absence that haunts her. It's the depth of your silence, the purpose behind it, the calm in your detachment. She doesn't feel ignored. She feels unsettled. Not because you withdrew, but because you didn't collapse into the noise. You didn't fight for validation. You chose clarity over chaos. You weren't seeking revenge. You were seeking wisdom. And that's what echoes in her mind now. While lesser men scrambled to be heard, you chose stillness. Not to punish, but to prepare. You didn't sulk in the shadows. You trained. You built. You studied. You remembered who the hell you were before the noise. You didn't do it for her. You did it because you had to. Because a man living by old Stoic wisdom knows growth is forged in solitude, not applause. Now, she can't stop thinking. Not because you begged her to, but because you didn't. You didn't fall apart. You didn't spiral. You moved forward with focus, with grace. That grace, it confuses her. She thought you'd linger, that you'd break, but instead you rose. That's what happens when a man walks the path of Stoic principles. He doesn't seek to prove, he seeks to become. You didn't wait around hoping she'd come back. You forged ahead, clean, deliberate, composed. That choice. That's what stays with her. Not your absence, but your transformation. And what really haunts her isn't the silence. It's the power in it. It's the memory of a man who didn't need to slam the door, who simply stopped knocking. You didn't erase her, but you rewrote the terms. You stopped making her your axis. And that shift, that quiet recentering, it changed everything. Because when a man has an iron mind, when he follows the thread of old Stoic wisdom, he doesn't just walk away, he leaves something behind, a ripple, a question, a legacy. She expected the drama, you gave her discipline. She expected pain, you gave her peace. And in that peace she found no closure, only curiosity. Because a man who pulls back to grow, not to punish, is unforgettable. That's the truth. And now she doesn't remember the fight. She remembers the fire you walked into and came out sharper. You didn't stall. You didn't wait for her to notice. You ascended, quietly, relentlessly, stoically, and now you live in her mind, not because you tried, but because you didn't have to. And that wraps up our look at 10 timeless Stoic principles that can make her think about you non-stop. If you found this video valuable, go ahead and give it a like, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more insights like these. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did anything here stand out to you? Do you have a different perspective or a personal story that connects with one of these points? Drop it in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and remember, mastering yourself is the first step to becoming unforgettable. Until next time, stay grounded, stay confident, and stay you.